What is going on, everybody? We are back and we're going to be discussing Donald J. Trump's tariffs and everything around that and how it's impacting the lives of everyday people. I think it's really important to highlight how a lot of times when people are talking about how great the economy is, it's a lot of focus on the Wall Street stocks, trade, things of that nature. And let's just keep it real for everyday working Americans, people on Main Street. What's going on in the world of stocks on Wall Street does not reflect well for people on Main Street. And what I mean by that is, even when you hear the federal government, whether it's Republicans in office or Democrats in office, whoever has the power or the leadership or the majority, doesn't really matter who the party is, because in both situations, they love to talk about how great their economy is when it's not. And a lot of times they'll sit up and talk about the hundreds of thousands of jobs that they've added to the job market, and yet they're not giving you the full detail. Out of those 100,000 plus jobs that are being added to the job market, they're low wage salaried positions. They're service economy jobs. These are the types of jobs like McDonald's, Walmart, Burger King, okay, Myers, Kroger's, things of that nature. You're never going to be able to live a quality life working at a place that's paying you poverty pay. But yet, these are the jobs that both Democrats and Republicans love to brag about as this being a job, burst. Oh, we have the lowest unemployment rate, even though we don't know what the true numbers of unemployment is. And also, if your low unemployment rate is due to the fact that people have to work two and three jobs to make ends meet because the jobs are all low wage, so you have to work two and three jobs just to get the salary of one full-time job, then no, that's not something to be bragging about. And it just needs to be said. But let's get into this conversation on the tariffs and how it's going to impact our lives. So, Wall Street leaders are warning of harsh economic consequences for Donald J. Trump's tariffs. Okay, this is being brought to me by NPR. Okay, so stocks swung widely for a third consecutive day in response to the coming widespread U.S. tariffs, many of which are set to take effect on Wednesday. Yes, that's right. April 9th, we will be seeing the impact of those tariffs starting. Now, some on Wall Street leaders are warning that more economic pain could be ahead. In fact, last week, literally 3, 4 days ago, it was a 35% chance of a recession. 3, 4 days later, today, April 7th, we're at a 45% chance of a recession. So you know how that goes. For my millennials, we've just been living in recession after recession after recession. In fact, literally 16 years ago, we were still dealing with the Great Recession of 2008. I was 16 years old. I am 32 years old now, and nothing has really changed. And Goldman Sachs is the one that raised the odds of the US recession to 45%, which is the second hike in a week. Okay. This is why I'm always like constantly paying attention to these things. And if you've been looking at my YouTube channel for well over a decade, I have covered the difficulties around employment, the fact that our wages and salaries never seem to actually reflect the cost of living or take inflation into consideration. But to give you a working definition of what a recession is before we get into the details of the tariffs, a recession is a period of significant decline in economic activity, characterized by a downturn in economic indicators like the GDP, okay, the gross domestic product. employment, and consumer spending lasting more than a few months. When you say a few basically is between 3 to 4 months. So basically, anytime we have a significant decline for over a quarter of the year, that is considered a recession. Okay. Um, so when you look at our gross domestic product, which is a sustained decline in real GDP, the monetary value of all final goods and services produced in a country is a key indicator. Which this is another reason why the USA is always kind of in a recession because we don't really make anything here. Like, I think a lot of people are going to be in for a horrible awakening when the tariffs hit because a lot of people don't understand the USA is is an import country. Like, we literally import the vast majority of our goods and services. We don't make anything here. In fact, why do you think we had the chip shortage for so long and had all these cars just chilling in fields for years at a time? Just for them to turn around and sell you the same car that's been sitting in a field for 6 months to a year or longer for the same overpriced costs. We had a chip shortage because, once again, where are we getting our chips? China and every other country, which, again, we don't build anything here. But yet we constantly want to talk about how great the manufacturing setup is when you're not manufacturing anything. Okay? Anyways, then you have employment, decreasing job growth, rising unemployment rates, and a contraction in the labor market are also strong indicators of a recession. Once again, Donald J. Trump came into, his second term laying thousands of people off at the federal level. And even if you weren't at the federal level, due to the massive cuts that he's made to various programs that we've already paid taxes for, that also trickled down to a lot of us being laid off of jobs because there was no funding for it anymore. So he created a lot of the unemployment rates increasing. It just needs to be said. That was under Trump's administration. Okay. Consumer spending, a decline in consumer spending as people reduce their purchase due to economic uncertainty, is another common characteristic of a recession. Yes, common sense would be to reduce spending. What is the purpose of use? First of all, most of us already can't afford what we used to be able to afford a year ago, let alone 5 years ago. Okay. Um, it was literally $17 and some change for 2 pounds of ground beef. So you put that into, we're back in the day, you used to be able to get 2 pounds for under $10. So you have to think about that. Everything is extremely expensive, and yet none of our wages and salaries have kept up with that. Then when you get to industrial production, there's also a drop in industrial production, reflecting a slowdown in manufacturing and other sectors, which is another clear indicator of a recession. Which brings me to this. When you look at a lot of these auto manufacturers and they're constantly building cars that end up sitting in vacant lots and they're just all parked up, you're going to see a lot of that. And you're going to see a lot of people being laid off from those auto manufacturing jobs. Okay. And then you would think common sense, stop building cars when you already know this is ahead of you. But nope. In this country, people are stuck on stupid, so they're going to continue cheering out cars that are overpriced in the first place. Again, why are you paying $80,000 a year or $80,000 to drive a freaking pickup truck? Well, I mean, literally, everything is overpriced to the extreme. Okay. Recessions can vary in length. Um, so when you look at this, some lasting for a few months and others for a longer period of time. Recessions can have a significant impact on you as an individual, businesses, and the overall economy, leading to a lot of job losses, businesses closures, and reduced income. Well, Rite Aid was one of the various signs early on. When you see major companies filing Chapter 11 bankruptcy. That is a clear indicator of what's to come for the rest of us. Okay? If you remember back in 2008, we had all the major three auto manufacturers were filing Chapter 11 bankruptcy and asking for bailouts from the federal government, which was our tax dollars. Once again, using our tax dollars to bail out multi-billion-dollar companies and corporations, while then telling us that we shouldn't be able to get our student loans forgiven. That's all I'm going to say. Okay. And again, the business cycle, recessions are a part of the business cycle, which includes periods of expansion, which is growth, and contraction, which is the recession, which also in of itself lets you see how capitalism is not a good economic structure because it's literally built in. That is exactly what the business cycle is. You're going to have a cyclical cycle of, oh, everything's going great. Now we have to lay everybody off instead of having something that is consistent and healthy. We can't have that in capitalism. There's always has to be these setups. And this is another reason why more and more people are becoming anti capitalists. Because again, we're not benefiting. Okay. Like, the value of the American dollar continues to decrease and plummet. I've talked about this all the time. Literally, go to the U.S. Department of Labor and look at their CPI inflation calculator, which is the Consumer Price Index inflation calculator. I will have a link again in the description box for you to check it out. I can guarantee if you put the salary that you're making today and look at how much the dollar value of your salary today and what it had 20, 30, 40 years ago, and you're probably going to be very angry because most of us should be making at least double what we're being paid. Okay? Um, and all of that information again is in the description box below. But, anyways, the business community has generally tried to avoid criticizing President Trump in public and has welcomed his promises of lower taxes and deregulation. Yes, lower taxes for the businesses and the corporations and the rich and the wealthy. Meanwhile, the rest of us, we're going to be paying more taxes and losing more value on our income. Doesn't really help us. And also, deregulation is very much dangerous for the public because basically they're getting rid of health and safe precautions so they can make more money for the corporations. So, who cares about your health and well being? We still have to make money. And that's basically what that is. But the ongoing market sell off appears to have loosened more tongues in the financial sector. JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon, who runs the largest U.S. bank and is one of the most powerful leaders on Wall Street, today warned that the tariffs will raise prices, slow economic growth, and hurt the country's global standing. Quote, the quicker this issue is resolved, the better, because some of the negative effects increase cumulatively over time and would be hard to reverse. Diamond wrote in his annual letter to shareholders, quote, in the short term, I see this as one large additional straw on the camel's back. I think a lot of us have already been broken as far as that. Like the camel's back has been split in two for a while for a lot of us. J.P. Morgan's chief economist warned last week that the tariffs will tip the U.S. into a recession this year. Dimon on Monday didn't go that far, writing that whether the tariffs cause a recession, quote, remains in question. He noted that his most serious concern is how this will affect America's long term economic alliances. Because again, you're putting tariffs on foreign countries that are allies of America, of the USA. So, like, you're screwing over your allies, you're screwing over your own citizens, you're screwing everyone over for what? Okay? Just needs to be said. Diamond is one of the few CEOs who has previously aired milder public concerns about Trump's trade policy. Quote, uncertainty is not a good thing, he told a conference last month. Goldman Sachs on Monday, today, April 7th, raised its prediction for the likelihood of a recession from 35% to 45%. Analysts for the investment bank attributed the upward revision to a sharp tightening in financial conditions, foreign consumer boycotts. That's the other thing. Like foreign countries are have already been boycotting American goods and services for like basically a month prior to the tariffs even coming into effect for us, which will start rolling out Wednesday, April 9th. So that's foreign, right? They're boycotting, and a continued spike in policy uncertainty that is likely to depress capital spending by more than we had previously assumed. On Sunday evening, President Trump was asked by reporters about the ongoing market sell off and how much pain in the markets he'd be willing to tolerate. Quote, I think your question is so stupid. I mean, I don't want anything to go down, but sometimes you have to take medicine to fix something. Quote, that's what our president said. Trump added that he thought inflation wouldn't be much of an issue for people beginning back to school shopping in the late summer and early fall. Quote, I don't think inflation is going to be a big deal. He said, first of all, and I'm just going to keep it real. Under Biden, inflation was ridiculous. Under Trump, inflation is ridiculous. And this is why I keep saying, really doesn't matter who is in the political party. Most of us on the main street are constantly being screwed over. Once again, when you're sitting up here, and let's also be honest, we're calling it inflation when in reality it's price gouging. Okay? Corporations are purposefully overcharging for goods and services, and they have the control to decrease the cost of goods and services. Because if you remember 5 years ago, at the height of the pandemic, when gas was literally $1.29 a gallon because nobody was driving, and it forced the gas corporations to lower the cost because supply and demand. They can literally arbitrarily choose to lower the prices if they want it to. But that's not going to make money for the shareholders because, heaven forbid, the rich and the wealthy cannot continue to pilferage off of us, the working people. Anyways, but even some of Trump's vocal supporters on Wall Street have begun to sound the alarm. In a lengthy thread posted on X on Sunday, billionaire hedge fund manager Bill Ackman called the tariffs an economic nuclear war on every country in the world. Ackman, who endorsed Trump before the election last year, said the trade war will force consumers to stop spending money and cause investments to dry up, hurting small and medium sized businesses in particular. Quote, business is a confidence game, he said. The president is losing the confidence of business leaders around the globe. Ackman said Trump could instead call a 90-day timeout, negotiate and resolve unfair asymmetric tariff deals, and induce trillions of dollars of new investment in the USA. Again, this is from the same billionaire hedge fund manager who supported President Trump November 5th, 2024. And once again, I'm going to keep saying this. I don't understand why everyday people on Main Street, you, me, us, I don't get how any of us can think that billionaires are going to ever be able to relate to any of the things that we're going through. They're not on our economic level. They can't even begin to fathom the vast majority of the trials and tribulations that many of us go through every single day because we're not being paid living wages. Do you really think Donald Trump and his family have to worry about if they're going to be able to pay rent or their car note. Do you really think Elon Musk and his family have to worry about if they're going to be able to pay the utilities or buy groceries? Again, you're asking people who will never suffer financially how they're going to somehow understand your struggles and care about you. This is the problem with electing rich and wealthy people. Okay, like you're never electing people that are actually from the same economic class as you. You ever notice that? Like very rarely are we electing middle class folks. We're definitely not electing working class and working poor people because guess what? It takes money to run an election and to win an election, which means most of us will never have that opportunity. So it just needs to be said like we're just pretty much screwed. A lot of people want to sugarcoat things. I'm not. I'm telling it like it is. I've been telling it like it is for over a decade. Okay, again, Goldman Sachs raised the odds of the U.S. recession to 45% from 35%, the second time it has increased its forecast in a matter of a week, amid a growing chorus of such predictions by investment banks due to an escalating trade war. Now, keep in mind, Goldman raised its estimate from 20% to 35% early last week. Okay, so within 2 weeks, we've gone up by 20%. I just need y'all to understand that. On fears that the U.S. President Donald Trump's planned tariffs would roll the global economy. And days later, Trump announced steeper than expected duties, which have ignited a sell off in global markets. Meanwhile, here it is everyday people are watching their 401k pretty much tank and disappear. And it's really sad, especially for those who are near retirement, because you're not going to be able to retire. Can you imagine being 6 months to a year or maybe 2 to 3 years out, and now all of a sudden your 401k has dropped by half or more? They're screwed, right? Like we're all screwed, but it's like most of us that are in our early 30s, you're going to have to work anyways till you're 72 because they keep increasing the retirement age. So, you're going to die working. So it doesn't even matter at this point for a lot of us when it comes to uh 401ks, 403bs, IRAs, mutual funds. Most of us are not going to see that anyways, not to mention if you haven't noticed your retirement accounts also do not keep up with the cost of living or reflect inflation. So by the time, if you're lucky to get to 72, by the time you get there, it's going to be at least triple or quadruple the cost of living. Yet you're basing your 401k off a 2025 cost of living. Yet in 2065, it's not going to be the same. Okay. We've already seen how that goes. Again, look at your salary on the Consumer Price Index inflation calculator. We've already seen how the value of the dollar continues to drop. Okay. I mean, again, what retirement account? Not to mention they're doing everything they can to take away Social Security, so you're not going to be able to lean on that either. You just, every day. Anyways, at least seven top investment banks have raised their recession risk forecast, with JP Morgan putting the odds of a U.S. global recession at 60%, on fears that the tariffs will not only ignite U.S. inflation, but also spark retaliatory measures from other countries, as China has already announced. Goldman on Sunday lowered its U.S. economic growth outlook for 2025 to 1.3% from its 1.5%. That though is higher than Wells Fargo Investment Institute, which 1% growth forecast, while JP Morgan estimates a 0.3% contraction on a quarterly basis. We're going to be at 1.2% contraction by the end of the year at a 0.3% contraction every 3 months. We're screwed. Anyways, on the other hand, Morgan Stanley said in a note dated for Sunday, April 6th, that while a recession in the U.S. is not in their base case, it is increasingly a realistic bear case. Okay, again, these are all investment lingo that, again, everyday people may not know. And that's the other thing. It's like the way they talk about things really highlights how they lack empathy for people, because everything is always about money and not the fact that this is impacting actual human beings in our everyday lives. Sooner rate cuts. Goldman still expects the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates by 25 basis points each in 3 consecutive meetings. However, it now expects the first of them to come in June, not July. JP Morgan expects a rate cut in each of the federal meetings in 2025 starting in June, with another cut in January taking the top range of the benchmark policy rate to 3%. It has previously expected that the Fed to lower rates twice this year from its current policy rate of 4.25% to 4.5%, which I'm always talking about this because when you look at the interest rates that a lot of us have on our car payments, our credit cards, your mortgage, um, shoot, your student loans, the whole 9 yards, a lot of us can't even refinance because the interest rates are still so high in comparison to what they were 5+ years ago. And when they decided to go from that 4.25% to 4.5%, I can't refinance anything because I'm already at 4.47%. I already have the lowest interest rate on my car payment. So it's like you can't, and this is 2 years after the fact. Like normally you can refinance and get a lower payment and a lower interest rate. Not in today's not in today's economy. Um, it's just it's insane. I don't. Whew, we just as millennials and Gen Zers, we cannot catch a break. Um, when it comes to the economy, when it comes to earning a quality living, being able to afford basic things. I mean, everything from groceries to becoming a homeowner is pretty much becoming impossible. Um, and we're constantly being blamed for things that we don't have control over. And once again, who's been controlling the show? It's baby boomers. That's why it's just like you're constantly complaining, oh, you all aren't responsible. And yet you don't pay us enough to be responsible to begin with. And then when you are responsible, what ends up happening? You're broke all the time because you're paying bills. So you're not really winning at being responsible either. Okay, and then every time you turn around, they're moving the bench. So you thought, oh, I just needed to get a degree. Then it was you needed 5 years of experience. Okay, you have a degree and 5 years experience. And now it's 10 years experience. And now you need a master's. You get a master's and you get 10 years of experience. And now your degree is completely useless. So every time you think you're getting somewhere, you're not. And that is how things have been set up for us from day one. And yet, why can't you start a family? How come you're not paying off your student loans? Why can't you buy a house? Look around. I'm sorry, but if your average starter home is over $250,000, you're going to have to earn a lot more than 50K a year to even be eligible for the mortgage. And then when you put everybody into massive student loan debt for useless ass degrees that can't do anything for you financially, your debt to income ratio is also too high. Because again, most of us owe more than we earn. So again, good luck on ever getting approved for a mortgage. Also, when it comes to the whole, relationship aspect of things, for folks to even begin to think about starting families, you actually have to date to even get to that level. And looking at our dating pool, good luck with that. Like, seriously, good luck with that. All right. Like, it's not looking good across the board for a lot of us. Um, and also, let's be honest, when you're living in an economic downturn and you're broke, you're not going to be the nicest outgoing person. And people typically don't want to date folks that are broke. So, again, all of this, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you buying this? You don't give us resources and support to do any of these things. I mean, you're still sitting up here with the federal minimum wage being $7.25 an hour since July 2009. And there's nowhere in the USA working $7.25 an hour, 40 hours a week. Nowhere in this country are you going to be able to afford rent on that. So, again, good luck. That's what we're constantly being told is pull yourself up from your bootstraps, even though you don't even have boots. Like, we didn't get any type of support, and yet we get to listen to the most entitled generation in this country claim everyone else is entitled. Meanwhile, they were allowed to have the equivalent of six-figure jobs as high school dropouts. And in here we are, the most educated generation, and yet we don't get paid shit. So I get sick and tired of listening to baby boomers who couldn't even make it through high school tell us about how things should be. And then arguably, they're still in charge, which is why we're dealing with the chaos that we're dealing with. I'm sorry, but maybe you don't need people who are senile making these types of decisions. Anyways, information is in the description box below. The best thing I can say at this point is start doing group economics. Like, seriously, get a group of friends to get a membership at Costco. Get a group of friends that can put money into, a fund so you can actually buy groceries and other goods for your group. You're going to have to start looking at things as a community project because arguably we are not paid enough to be individuals. We're not. You can't live in today's society on 50K by yourself. It has gotten to the point where you have to have roommates. You have people that are in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, and some of them are even in their 60s, still living at home with their parents because they're not paid enough to actually get out here and get their own place. I mean, like I said, your average starter home is well over $250,000. And if you know anything about mortgage, you're only supposed to go up 3 times your income. So, for example, if you make $50,000 a year, the most expensive house mortgage that you can afford is $150,000. Which, again, if the home is well over $250,000 and up, you're going to have to make at least 75, 80K. And a lot of people aren't even getting that. So, oh, and also your debt to income ratio has to be low, which most of us don't have that either because we went to college. Not to mention, a lot of people have a lot of credit card debt. A lot of people have the car loans and medical debt. Again, living in capitalism, you're basically it's designed for you to be in some form of debt because they purposely never pay you enough to live to begin with. Hence why everything has to be on credit and you're constantly borrowing money and paying interest rates that are sky high on top of trying to pay off the original debt. So it's just a disaster. Anyways, as I stated, try to save where you can save. Try to do group economics. Um, and really just be mindful of where your money is going as much as you can. And granted, I understand it's not really gonna be realistic for most of us. Um, Especially when you look at where our money is going. Like, I do budgets all the time, which is also why I get very angry when people are constantly talking about financial literacy as being the answer to our problems. When you can have all the financial literacy you want, if you don't have the money to apply the information, it doesn't matter. Like, seriously, we're making budgets on budgets on budgets, and it doesn't matter when every time you get paid, most of your income is going to bills. How are you going to save money when all of your money is going to bills? Please do enlighten us all. Instead of just paying people a living wage so folks can pay their bills and save. Because that's the other thing. When you listen to baby boomers, they didn't have to be financially literate because they were being paid well over a living wage. I mean, literally, when you listen to these people, they're sitting up, they were able to buy houses at 18 and 19 years old. Okay, number one. You know, they're taking their entire families to Disney World on a consistent basis. And then here it is today, you can't even afford to go camping for 3 days. So again, they didn't have to budget, but yet they always want to tell you how you need to budget on nothing. Keep that in mind. We're not even getting paid enough to budget. Okay, at this point, budgeting for us is not paying certain bills. Like, literally, that's the only way you're going to be able to budget. You got to figure out, are we going to pay the cell phone bill this month or this pay period? Or are we going to not pay the car payment? Like, what are we going to do to shift money to budget? Because that's basically what is happening, right? Like, people are literally selling plasma to pay bills. People have 2 and 3 jobs to pay bills. It's absolutely ridiculous out here.